Welcome to Rebel Chaser. My name is Gail, and I have a clip for you from Judge Bromlich in Michigan. He's holding an emergency custody hearing because father is throwing out the most horrendous accusations he possibly could. Wildly horrendous. And mom says there's coaching and brainwashing going on. To me, it sounds like dad is trying to erase mom from his children's lives. The mother of his children, he wants erased. He's actually trying to hurt her and embarrass her with these accusations, and it's disgusting. But I'll let you guys watch. I don't want to say too much. You guys watch.
Court is now in session. Patrick Dunn versus Sarah Dunn.
For the record, this matter is before the court for an emergency hearing earlier this week. This hearing is being conducted via Zoom, I should say. First of all, present are Attorney Christina Hills, representing the plaintiff father, Kevin Dom, and Mr. Dom is present. In addition, attorneys Kimberly Kuhn and Lauren Zahner are present, representing defendant mother, Sarah Dom, and Ms. Dom is present. In addition, Garnett Lightham, Amber Billmeyer is present. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Earlier this week, the court received, actually on the same day, earlier this week, motions for ex parte relief from both plaintiff father and defendant mother's counsel, each wanting to suspend the other parent's parenting time. In addition, the court reviewed those motions, did not want to address them until the court could hear from both sides. The court is also in receipt of medical reports that have been submitted sealed for the court's review from ProMedica Hospital relative to allegations made by the plaintiff father on behalf of the minor child Kevin, 5-year-old Kevin, alleging that he had sustained some injuries, suggesting to medical personnel that mother was the suspect for causing this injury. But in any event, the court has reviewed all that. The parties have conferred with Ms. Patrick in front of the court this afternoon. Ms. Patrick has provided the following recommendation, which I'll share with everyone, then I'll hear from everyone. Ms. Patrick has recommended that the minor children be returned to defendant mother today at 6 p.m. For that, defendant mother shall have make-up parenting time April 5th, 6th, and 7th, 2024 as make-up parenting time. Commencing April 12th, which is a week from Friday. The father will commence his previously court-ordered parenting time for weekends. It's noted that the guardian ad litem, Mr. Bellmeyer, is recommending that plaintiff father's parenting time be suspended. So this is a recommendation made, noting the position of Mr. Bellmeyer. That is a recommendation. Ms. Hills, your response on behalf of your client?
With regard to the recommendation, my client is still requesting that his motion be granted and that mother's motion be denied.
Right.
Would you like to hear
Ms.
argument
Kuhn?
from me at this point, or hear from Ms. Kuhn first?
We'll hear from the other side, then I'll hear argument to Ms. Kuhn or Mr. Zinner, who wants to speak on behalf of Ms. Dom.
Your Honor, we're requesting that our motion be granted and that plaintiff's motion be denied.
Okay. Ms. Billmeyer, you are recommending, after having reviewed the pleadings and medical reports, that dad's parenting time be suspended. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor. If you recall, my recommendation from the start was a 6-month suspension of father's time because my concern was that this was going to happen over and over and over again. And I just want to point out that it has.
In terms of father making the allegations that the mother is abusing the children physically?
That's correct.
Okay.
And if you recall, Your Honor, there was a report after forensic interviews were done of the children that indicated there was that they believed the children were being brainwashed by grandmother and father to make these absurdly wild accusations.
Thank you for refreshing the court's memory. And if the court, perhaps you could correct the court if I'm wrong, is there not an order in place right now that prohibits contact between the paternal grandmother and the children?
There is a court order, yes, that part of it's taken care of.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, the argument, Ms. Ellis?
Thank you, Your Honor. At this point in time, Your Honor, we have an open CPS investigation regarding these allegations in both Ohio and in Monroe County. Amber McFall is the CPS worker who has been assigned here in Monroe. I know the court has reviewed the motions. I do not intend to belabor any of the contents of the motion. I would just point to the medical records from Toledo and indicate that their differential diagnosis, it states, includes but is not limited to abuse, and that the doctor noted that there was shallow tearing. Tearing is the word that was used, with no active bleeding, and the child tolerated the exam well. There was a SANE exam done at Toledo Hospital. We do not have the results of that yet. There is a Toledo Police Department investigation. I provided the case number for that in the motion. I do not believe my client has had contact with any investigator in that case as of yet, but we have multiple open investigations as to the allegations in this case at this point. There have been multiple unexplained injuries to the children, bites, scratches, bruises. My client has asked mother for an explanation for those injuries. She has not provided him any explanation as to how the kids got those injuries. Mr. Haskins, in his most recent letter, seems to explain that the children roughhouse together in his office a lot. So he offers an explanation, but my client can't seem to get one from mother. Mr. Dom is being painted as an alienator. I think that's far too simple and easy a fix to this, if you want to call it that. There definitely needs to be a deeper look as to why these kids are saying these very disturbing things that they're saying to my client about what is happening at mother's house. Whether they are true or not true, the fact that they're saying them to dad is very alarming. And to ask him not to act on those things, I do not believe that is fair at all. He took the children to the doctor, the emergency department at ProMedica, which I advised him to do after he advised me what the allegations were. He also let Ms. Billmeyer know what the allegations were at the time. He informed mother what he was going to be doing with regard to taking the kids to the emergency department. When faced with children who are corroborating each other's stories as to what allegedly happened, and combining that with bleeding from the, he had no choice but to do what he did. If he didn't do that, ultimately, if there is abuse happening and he's determined not to be protecting these children, then he could lose his parental rights for not taking action. Mr. Haskins, in his letter, which I don't know if the court has seen or not, simply says that he doesn't find the statements that are made by Kevin and Noah to be credible, but he doesn't say they're not making them. Again, we need to get to the bottom of why the kids are saying these things. If they're acting completely differently with mother, why are they acting so completely differently with mother and father? My client tells me he is in no way coaching these children, brainwashing them, but somehow they're coming up with these outlandish sounding allegations. But again, if my client doesn't act on those, if he simply says to the kids, sit down and be quiet, these things can't possibly be true. These children who have PTSD and have been traumatized in the past are now being traumatized again by having their statements and their feelings being invalidated by the person who's supposed to be there fighting for them and protecting them. So I'm also concerned, Mr. Haskins has completely cut my client out of any sort of contact with him at this point. We had agreed last time we were in front of the court that I would be able to get the information in writing from my client and pass that along to Mr. Haskins. My client put together a very thoughtful report, passed that along to me. I forwarded it to Mr. Haskins probably a matter of a couple of weeks ago at this point, at least a week ago. And I've not gotten so much as a thank you for the email, Ms. Hills, not any sort of indication that he's even received the email that I sent. So as far as I know, my client has no contact at all with the one person who is really charged with trying to help the children navigate this whole situation. And again, I don't think that telling the children that, oh, you're lying, you know, stop saying those things is the right way to handle this. He did exactly the right thing by contacting the authorities. He did what the doctors did, but making a 3,200 to CPS. And frankly, he did what I believe our friend of the court would have done under the circumstances had Mr. Dom called them and said, here's what my children are saying. So I don't think he can be penalized for doing what he needs to do to protect the children. Now it's up to the authorities who are charged with investigating these sorts of things to determine and get to the bottom of what exactly is going on here. And if these things are not true, then why the children are saying them. And if they are true, then to deal with it in a way that is appropriate under the circumstances. Again, I have serious concerns about Mr. Haskins continuing on as a therapist for the reasons I've already mentioned. This letter appears to be a character reference letter for mother. He's essentially a cheerleader for mom at this point. He makes statements which are incorrect as to the timing of the incident, alleged incident, which led to the report in this case. And I do believe that he should be replaced as counselor. We could go with wraparound in Toledo. They have counselors available. We could go with another counselor who could be agreed on in Monroe, but I don't believe that Mr. Haskins has the objectivity or the ability to continue on and help these children navigate this situation. So we are asking that the court suspend mother's parenting time until Toledo PD, until CPS in both locations can complete their investigations, and not penalize father for doing what he needed to do to protect his children and what any professional under the circumstances would have done. And that's make a report and let the people who do the investigations of these things do their investigations. He would again ask the court to suspend mother's parenting time rather than send the children back into a potentially abusive situation, at least until we have those reports from the authorities. We don't even have the report, if I didn't say this earlier, we don't even have the report from the SANE examination at this point, which I think is a critical piece of the puzzle here. The report used the word tearing. The doctors were aware that Kevy had diarrhea for a couple of days. There's no indication that in the records that injury was consistent with diarrhea. Tearing is the word that they use. So I think it's important, in fact, critical, that we wait for the professionals do their jobs, come to their conclusions, and for the SANE kit information to be received as well.
Thank you, Ms. Hills. Ms. Kuhn?
Yes, Your Honor. So what's really interesting in this case is that Ms. Hills argues that Mr. Dom did what he should have done. However, if the court looks closely at Mr. Dom's actions, Mr. Dom did what Mr. Dom wanted to do. And I just want you to follow my logic, Your Honor. If you look at page 2 of Ms. Hill's motion, it states that plaintiff took the child to ProMedica Monroe Hospital where testing was done. It was confirmed that a child had an injury to his. It also states that the child was complaining of pain. His bottom hurt when he was wiping. If you look at the ProMedica records, father stated that for the past 2 days, the minor child has had diarrhea. And if you look further into the records, it states from ProMedica that there are no obvious external signs of trauma on exam, no active bleeding. In fact, the child didn't even complain of any discomfort. So Mr. Dom signs this petition to suspend mother's parenting time under oath that there was injury that was confirmed by ProMedica. There was a CT scan done. It was done in Toledo. ProMedica said, hey, no obvious signs, but if you feel the need to go deeper, you're gonna have to have a CT scan and a SANE exam. Father made the decision to have this child undergo yet another SANE exam. Your Honor, it's abuse to even have a child undergo one SANE exam when there's never been any substantiation of abuse. In fact, the CPS allegations that Mr. Dom has made in the past alleging sexual abuse where this child has had to undergo a SANE exam have all been unsubstantiated. So yet here's this poor kid undergoing yet a third SANE exam on Easter morning at 2:30 in the morning, Your Honor. But yet Mr. Dom knows that the child has had diarrhea for 2 days. And I'm confused as to why Mr. Dom is wiping Kevy's with the tissue. The child, from my understanding, is self-sufficient and wipes his own at mom's house. So that's a little concerning that he's doing that as well. But if you Google what the exact term for the anal tear, it states that it can occur from constipation. It can occur from wiping. A tear, a superficial tear is certainly not the injury that would be caused by a butter knife being up a child's. And I'm going to let Mr. Zahner talk about that because Mr. Zahner has actually spoke as an expert on abuse and just those issues. But as a parent having child that has had diarrhea before, there is bleeding sometimes. So the fact that there were other plausible explanations, but Mr. Dom wanted his child to undergo a SANE exam and to undergo a CT, a full body CT, presumably to see if there were any broken bones, is just absolutely preposterous, Your Honor, on Easter morning. This is what this child was doing. If you look at past indicators, Mr. Dom is always accusing Miss Dom of abuse. In fact, the guardian ad litem mentioned that she's getting allegations every weekend that Mr. Dom has the children. My client gets these archaic messages, oh, took the children to the doctor, everything's okay. So what's happening is these kids are going home, being subjected to what, a full body scan, and then being rushed off to the doctor to see if there's any abuse? Your Honor, that's abuse. We have done everything in this case, Your Honor. This court has suspended mother's parenting time. This court has supervised mother's parenting time. The one thing that we haven't done is suspend father's parenting time. These kids need help. They need to heal. We need the 6 months so that mom can get the kids the appropriate medical attention they need. Dr. Memon recommended Abilify for Noah. Father's refusing to even consider it. This child needs medication and father can't even do the right thing. The sabotaging of these children, the subjecting them to medical exams, the refusal to find any other plausible explanation for bright red superficial bleeding when your butt is wiped after 2 days of diarrhea is just absolutely just beyond, it's incomprehensible to me, Your Honor. This situation, if Mr. Dom wants to continually subject his kids to this type of evasive procedures and not understand that, I mean, these kids have stated that giant microwaves have dropped from the sky in their backyard and injuries have occurred because monsters have come out of microwaves. Some of the allegations, all of the allegations so far, there's been no allegation that's been substantiated. CPS has been involved every time Mr. Dom makes a complaint. In fact, CPS said that Mr. Dom and his mother are coaching and brainwashing these kids. These kids need to be away from Mr. Dom. It is the only way to ensure that these kids are going to be able to heal. These kids are getting damaged every day, every SANE exam, every doctor appointment. Mr. Dom chose Mr. Haskins. These kids actually enjoy talking to Mr. Haskins. And the reason why Mr. Dom doesn't want Mr. Haskins to work with the kids is because Mr. Haskins is saying, hey, look, there are issues here. The kids are saying things that aren't true, but Mr. Dom wants to continue believing that false narrative that Sarah Dom is a monster, that she's going to hurt her kids, that she's an abuser. Mr. Haskins doesn't subscribe to that false narrative, so he needs to go, according to Mr. Dom. That is doing a disservice to these children. Mr. Haskins is a very good therapist. He has a very good relationship with these kids. In fact, he's supposed to see these kids today. The kids have an appointment on Thursday at 4:30. I'm hoping that the kids are returned to mom so that these kids can get to their appointment with Mr. Haskins. Because you know what? When they're undergoing the things that they're undergoing, when they're having to deal with what they're dealing with, they need help. Your Honor, I would ask that you let Mr. Zahner talk about what an injury would look like if a butter knife were. And I would ask that the court also consider what the guardian ad litem has to say, who gets all of the allegations of abuse after every weekend of Mr. Dom's parenting time. I would ask that the court listen to them as well. And I would strongly urge the court, please suspend Mr. Dom's parenting time so that these kids have a shot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuhn. Mr. Zahner?
Yes, just briefly, the court, just using common sense, you think of a 5-year-old child and a butter knife going into it. There's going to be all kinds of abrasions. There's going to be cuts. There's going to be pain. There was none of that at all in this case. And so these allegations are absolutely ridiculous and clearly false. Father's been doing things that make up allegations with these kids. We don't know what was said. Amber has seen a video because our client's been videotaping when she has these kids with Kevin sitting on his rear end. If he had been abused, that wouldn't have been happening. So there would be all kinds of physical evidence, and there's none. And Amber can tell that as well as I can. She's a nurse.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the lawyers on the case offering what certainly feels like expert testimony without ever A, being qualified as an expert, but B, it being completely inappropriate for lawyers on the case to be providing any sort of expert analysis.
Court recognizes Mr. Zahner's opinion, of course, is years of experience in practice of law, particularly criminal cases. But we're from Mr. Delmeyer. Thank you, Mr. Zahner.
Thank you, Judge.
Your Honor, after the allegations came out this weekend, I did not actually see them till Monday morning. I requested that mother provide me with the video recordings from the inside of her home. As you may recall, we made that a court order during the right when her parents were starting to supervise her visits, and she had some in-home visits, because my concern was that there would be continued allegations of abuse. So I've had to look at these recordings in the past as well, after father's reported more abuse when he gets the kids back. So I did happen to look at the video. I've actually watched it twice, and there's audio to it. So it was a very good video quality. It was my understanding from both the reports and Kevin's emails to me concerning the events that he believes that this occurred on Friday before the children were returned to him. There was only a short window of time where the children were actually at home before the exchange for father's parenting time was to happen. So I viewed about 55 minutes of video, and these children were well-behaved, having fun with their grandpa, who was sitting on the couch. There were periods of time where they were playing with each other, happy-go-lucky, structured environment. Mother's making sure they're getting ready to go to dad's. Kevy's in the restroom. Kevy's complaining. Door's open, by the way. Kevy's in the bathroom going, Mom, I have diarrhea. And Mom goes, I know, Kevy, I know. I hope it gets better. And then he says, I need to drink lots of water. So this is obviously a conversation that he and his mother have had about his issue with diarrhea. Door's open. Kids are coming in and out. Grandpa's sitting on the couch. Clearly there was that the short period of time that I looked, that she was actually home between work and picking up the kids from school or grandparents until the exchange happened, these kids were fine. They were absolutely perfect. And Sarah did a great job. And there were periods of time where Kevy sat on Sarah's couch abuts her kitchen counter. So it's kind of easy if the kid's sitting on top of the couch to scoot onto the counter, which is obviously a hard surface. Just playing away with the cat, obviously not in pain. So I have not seen anything suspicious to support the allegations that have been made. And again, I do get, and to Kevin's benefit, because I told him I want these I want him to send me these things. But pretty much following every visit, I do get an update about a bruise, a scratch, a bite mark, etc. The other thing that concerns me, Your Honor, is these. I feel that Father, like the sheer mention to mother that he's taking the children to the ER is probably not enough, and that disturbs me greatly, because he should be giving mother. He should be, first of all, it's an emergency if you're taking a kid to the emergency room. You should be letting mother make an informed decision as to whether she should be there or not. And instead it was vague. His response to me when I asked him why that's not happening was, well, she has access to my chart as well. And that doesn't fly with me. I have concerns that these kids are being exposed to inappropriate medical exams after mom's visits all the time. So apparently we're padding the record. The continued abuse allegations, which I cautioned this court with both in my report and every time we've been in a pretrial, that this just continues to happen. So I have, from the start in my first report, recommended a 6-month suspension of father's time in order to let things cool off. And I still support that. We do have another issue, Your Honor, if I can just talk a couple more minutes. The child has been assessed by psychiatry, Dr. Memon, and Dr. Memon has suggested that there could be a medication that would assist Noah with his rage issues and emotional lability. And that medication is called Abilify. At first, I believe father was on board with that. Father is medical decision-making authority, although I do believe this court gave me the authority at the last pretrial to make that decision. There's still a lot of hesitation by Dr. Memon because he's getting calls questioning whether this is actually appropriate. And I understand that Christina needs to do her job, but he's obviously getting spooked because I'm calling to talk to him about the concerns being raised about whether or not he should start it. And the attorneys are calling. Now Dr. Memon has to consult with his legal team before he even speaks to me or makes a decision. We're probably going to lose this psychiatrist. But in any event, it's April 4th. This child has got severe issues in school, and we have this opportunity right now to see if this medication is going to assist him, yet it hasn't been started because both parents can't agree. So I have concerns about that. And I
Thank you, Ms. Billmeyer.
I've covered everything.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I respond to some of those things?
Briefly?
Thank you. As Ms. Billmeyer knows, my client and I have an appointment to speak with her via Zoom tomorrow. Medication was certainly going to be one of the topics of conversation. Dr. Memon did not recommend a medication, which was the language that our court order used. He said that the parents needed to agree, and if the parents agreed to put Noah on medication, that Abilify is what he would suggest. My client has concerns about side effects of that medication, one of which, as I understand it, is a pretty serious progressive motor disorder, movement disorder, which can even include involuntary movements. And so he would like to take a little bit of time and consider this and look at whether there are alternatives, which might not carry so many side effects. I did have what I thought was a very amicable conversation with Dr. Memon, who I have a little bit of history with, and that's what he clarified. So the parents do need to decide, and if they're unable to, then the court can do with that what it wishes, set an evidentiary hearing, or simply make a decision. My client did everything that was recommended by the doctors. The doctors at ProMedica recommended the same exam. They recommended the CT scan. Everything else that he did was doctor driven at that time. And I believe there's only been one prior SANE exam. I'm not aware that there have been 2 prior SANE exams. The reason he was wiping the child is because the child had diarrhea. He wasn't convinced that the child was able to make sure he got himself clean at his age. So my client's being diligent and making sure that the child is clean after a bout of diarrhea. Again, I don't think this is a situation where my client should be punished by losing time completely with his children for making a report that any of the professionals would have, and in fact did make under the circumstances. And as I'm glad Ms. Billmeyer indicated that she did, my client was kind of reprimanded previously for not informing her of claims that the children were making. So I'm glad she indicated then that she did ask him to do that. And he's reporting things that they're telling him. I'm not sitting here telling you, and I don't think my client would sit here and tell you that everything that the children are saying is in fact 100% factual. They are saying these things, however, and that's again what we need to get to the bottom of. Why such a difference between dad's and mom's house, and what's going on in these little guys' heads?
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, may I respond just quickly?
Very briefly.
Your Honor, the problem is Mr. Dom is picking and choosing what he wants to believe. And as I stated, if you look at the ProMedica report, ProMedica didn't say, go have a SANE exam and go do a CT scan. They stated, discussed with Kevin, that if there's concern for injury, a CT scan and a SANE exam, they would need to proceed with further workup. So no, that is absolutely not true that the hospital said, you need to do this. They left it on Kevin Dom, and Kevin Dom is picking and choosing what he wishes to believe. Again, Your Honor, the guardian ad litem is recommending it. We're asking, Your Honor, his parenting time has never been suspended, not asking to punish him, Your Honor, just asking to take out what we believe is creating issues for this child. We're also asking that the court order that this child be permitted to try this medication. There are many children on Abilify. They actually start children on Abilify at age 6. And it can help with rage, explosive anger disorder. And this child is having big problems. Why wouldn't we try something to see if it's going to help this child and make a big difference in this child's education and social world and his self-esteem? Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to the medication of Abilify, if the parties cannot, the 2 parents cannot agree to administer the medication, the court would schedule an evidentiary hearing. I appreciate the analysis and involvement of Ms. Billmeyer. With respect to Mr. Haskins, the court will not remove Mr. Haskins from his involvement in this case. If the court recalls, and I did not receive, Ms. Hills, the last letter from Mr. Haskins, it didn't come to the court's attention. But if the court recalls, it was the plaintiff father that created that conflict with Mr. Haskins and caused Mr. Haskins to indicate he was no longer going to communicate with Mr. Dom because he is not cooperating in the best interest of the children. That's court's recollection. So whatever, of course, not going to remove Mr. Haskins as a counselor for these children. With respect to the court cannot ignore the fact that the medical reports indicate that the plaintiff father, upon presenting the minor child, Kevin, to the emergency room, he didn't just complain of bleeding or that the child complained of pain. His complaint was he suspected that mother abused the child by a butter knife in the room of his 5-year-old child. That's a shocking allegation. The court cannot believe that any mother would do that to a 5-year-old child. The medical reports confirm that the child had diarrhea. The reports do not seem to suggest any significant, any tear. If there was any even suggestion of a tear, perhaps it was caused by the child straining. I don't know, but there's certainly nothing that convinces this court that there was an intentional butter knife in this child's. And the court's concerned about why he just wouldn't ask tell the medical professionals, well, my son has some bleeding from, he's complaining of pain. Have them examine that rather than suggesting this was the cause, that mother was the cause of this. At this point in time, the court will deny the motions of both parents to suspend the other parent's parenting time. The court gives great deference to the opinion and recommendation of Ms. Billmeyer. The court recognizes she has an education and experience in the medical field as a nurse. And Ms. Billmeyer, the court greatly appreciates your continued assistance with this matter. But suspending dad's parenting time, I'm concerned. How do we then repair the relationship between dad and the child? But if this continues, that obviously is certainly the court will do that if we have continued to have these outrageous allegations and unnecessary treatment. Ms. Kuhn, is your client just asking what 3 days of makeup parenting time?
Yes, Your Honor. My client would ask to pick up the children immediately after we're done with court so that she can get them to their counselor. There's an actual counselor appointment today.
Right. Well, it's 3:45 right now, so the court will order that the minor children return to defendant mother forthwith. If we can keep that appointment with Mr. Haskins today, that would be wonderful. Mr. Dom, can you take the children to Mr. Haskins' office at 4:30 today?
Yes, wherever the court needs.
Yes, so ordered. So ordered to return the children, deliver the children to Mr. Haskins' office at 4:30 today. The children will be with mother this coming weekend, April 5th, 6th, and 7th. 2024 is makeup parenting time. Dad's parenting time will resume April 12th, a week from Friday. The court also, and finally, the court notes that there's consent order entered in 2020, in which the plaintiff father had sole decision-making authority relative to medical and educational decisions. The court's going to modify that. That was at a time in 2020 when mother had limited parenting time. Mother has significant parenting time right now. So the court believes that any medical decision should be made jointly by the parties. So Mr. Dom, you don't, if in fact you're taking children to the emergency room, you need to notify mom immediately before you get in that transport. Let mom know exactly why you're taking them and where. And no medical procedures shall be performed without the consent of mother, the joint consent. If you can't agree, then Ms. Billmeyer will make that decision.
Yes, sir.
If it's an emergency medical decision, two we cannot agree, Ms. Billmeyer will make that decision. The bill 5 is not an emergency decision, so if the parents cannot agree, the court will schedule an evidentiary hearing on that limited issue alone. We'll take brief testimony from Dr. Memon and Ms. Billmeyer, perhaps. But from this point forward, the court will order that the parties share equally any decisions relative to medical treatment. And hopefully that will eliminate putting these children through these types of exams that we have here. Is there anything else that the court needs to address this afternoon? Ms. Hills, Ms. Kuhn, Mr. Zahner, Ms. Billmeyer?
Your Honor, I just want to make sure that we don't run into the situation. We've had issues before where Mr. Dom just basically says, well, the kids don't want to come. The kids aren't going to get out of the car. I don't want to have an issue today where we have a repeat of that, since we seem to repeat a lot of our narratives. So I just want to make sure that the kids are going to be delivered to Mr. Haskins' office, that they will be out of the car, and that Mr. Dom will then leave once the kids are delivered to Mr. Haskins.
That sounds like it's the court's order, and my client will follow the court's order.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Hills. If the court would expect that, if not, obviously Mr. Dom is jeopardizing his parenting time. So the court will expect that the children will be delivered to Mr. Haskins at 4:30. Ms. Dom, you may want to notify Mr. Haskins that the children will be there for their scheduled appointment this afternoon at 4:30, so that can all happen.
Judge, if I may throw in one thing, if I recall last time with the medical decisions concerning any prescription medication, the court, I believe, had said if the parents cannot agree, the guardian was able to make that decision, so we didn't have to waste court's time to have hearing. So
well,
that's
any emergency medical decision, Mr. Zahner, the court would authorize Ms. Billmeyer to do that. But if in fact this medication, a bill 5 is not emergency, and the court would be willing to entertain an evidentiary hearing on that. It should not be a lengthy hearing. But any
Okay.
medical treatment decision parties cannot agree upon, and Ms. Bearmark can make that decision, because obviously that's an emergency. So Ms. Patrick, you can add your recommendation that the parties, the priority of this court is modified so that the plaintiff and defendant, both parents shall have equal authority, should share equally any decision for medical treatment decisions. And with that addition, this recommendation, the court will, I will conclude this matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Judge.
Thanks, Judge.
All right, everyone can zoom out. Thank you again, Ms. Bellmeyer. The court greatly appreciates your time and attention to this challenging case.
I think it's highly unlikely that mom is doing what dad is accusing her of. On the other hand, I think it's very likely that they are being coached and brainwashed against mom. To me, he sounds like he's trying to erase her from their life. And he's trying to embarrass her. He's trying to hurt her. And actually what he's doing is he's embarrassing and harming his children. And it's pretty sick what he's doing. He's psychotic. So I hope the judge realizes that and can straighten that out before the children are harmed too much more, because they are being harmed by that man. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.